Hey guys! In the heart of Libya's dangerous political and military landscape, a team of American operatives find themselves thrust into a relentless struggle against unseen enemies. As darkness descends over Benghazi, tensions escalate, and loyalties are tested in a deadly game of survival. Will they be able to survive such overwhelming odds? Keep watching as we dive into the reality-based story of the action thriller movie. But before we start, hit that like and subscribe button and prepare for some major spoilers. Welcome to Popcorn and Summaries. The movie opens with Jack Silva, the latest member of the team, arrives at the airport and is welcomed by his friend Roan Woods, the leader of the GRS team. During the drive to the annex, they witness a firefight and find themselves surrounded by local militants. Roan attempts to call for backup, but the CIA chief prohibits Roan's men from leaving the base. The militants demand to search their vehicles, prompting Roan to bluff about having air support to scare them, although they lack such assistance. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe for more content like this and support the channel. However, the militants believe his threat, and they let them go. Later, Roan and Jack arrive at the CIA base. Roan immediately talks to the chief about not sending his men. The chief doesn't agree and tells Roan that he doesn't want the GRS causing any problems while the locals sort things out. He sees them as hired help, not part of the CIA. After this, Jack meets the rest of the team, Geist, Tonto, Tig, and Boone. They become his new brothers in arms. He also checks out the area and is told always to have a weapon with him. Later, he goes to his room and thinks about how his wife, Becky, doesn't like him being on this mission. Sometime later, Jack talks with the chief, who tells him that it's the American government who wants the GRS there, not him. He really doesn't want any trouble with the locals and wants the GRS to stay out of the way of his excellent CIA team. Later that day, Roan tells his men about a meeting between two CIA officers and a Libyan oil company executive. They've been working on this for months. Jack has to pretend to be the husband of one of the CIA officers, Giuliani. But Giuliani isn't very friendly, which makes it a bit worrying for Jack. The GRS keeps an eye on the meeting, but they soon realize someone is watching them. Roan has to interrupt the meeting to leave quickly. When Jack gets the signal, he grabs Giuliani and Vayner and rushes them back to the car. The CIA agents are annoyed due to this sudden interruption at first, but they calm down when they realize they're being followed. During a chase, Roan makes the car following them crash into a forklift before escaping. Later, Jack finishes a call with his wife, Becky, and joins a meeting with Glenn Doherty, the GRS commander in Tripoli. Glenn tells them that the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens, will be coming to Benghazi on Monday to keep up diplomatic ties amid the chaos. He'll have limited protection from 5 DSS agents, mainly Wickland and Ubben, along with guards from the local February 17th Martyrs Brigade militia, called 17 February. They'll be protecting the ambassador once he arrives. After the briefing, they head to the Special Command outpost and encounter the 17 February militants. After getting past them, they meet with Wickland and Ubben, the DSS agents protecting the compound. After checking out the compound, the GRS men realize the DSS agents don't have enough gear, and the compound is very vulnerable. If a big attack happens, they're in big trouble. Still, Roan assures the DSS agents that they'll be just a mile away at the CIA post if anything happens. They can call for help, and they'll rush over. On Monday, the GRS, along with their local translator Amal, meets with some grumpy local militants. They calm them down with a peace sign and then buy weapons from them so they can trace the truck and find the supplier. Later, Ambassador Stevens meets the team and tells them it's crucial to make peace with the Libyans for the sake of democracy. Most of the team pays attention, but Tonto falls asleep. The chief talks to him afterward and warns him to act like a professional or he'll be sent home. Afterward, the GRS escorts Ambassador Stevens to a meeting with Benghazi's mayor. They're upset when unauthorized journalists show up to cover the event. But everything goes smoothly while the ambassador speaks. Later that day, the GRS tells the DSS agents they were lucky. After sorting things out, the DSS introduces the GRS to Sean Smith, a surveillance specialist setting up equipment. Then the GRS goes back to base. The next day, everything seems normal at the base. Still, the ambassador worries about security as he notices locals watching the outpost on the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, while all the US embassies all over the world are facing strong protests from Muslims, condemning the release of a blasphemous movie. On the other hand, while communicating with their families back home, the GRS members share moments from their lives. Jack discovers that Becky is pregnant, bringing him joy amidst the chaos. As the sun sets, militants from Ansar al-Sharia gather and launch an attack on the outpost with rifles and RPGs. They catch the ambassador and his DSS guards off guard, storming the building and firing at everyone they see. The local 17 February guards, not willing to risk their lives for a mere $28 a day, surrender their positions, making it easy for the attackers to enter the compound. This initial assault happens around 9 p.m. In response to the attack, Wickland leads Stevens and Sean into the safe room for protection. At the annex, the GRS team is eager to rush to the compound and help, but the chief refuses, fearing that their absence will leave the annex vulnerable. Meanwhile, the CIA staff, aware of the crisis, requests a plane to be sent to Benghazi. However, the embassy in Tripoli lacks military assets to assist, and the African command in Germany requires 45 minutes and approval from the White House to respond. At that moment, the militants menacingly approach the safe room. Unable to break in, they set the building on fire, hoping to force the men out. Back at the base, Tonto asks a local interpreter, Amal, to accompany them to help translate when speaking with 17 February, but the chief insists that Roan stand down. Meanwhile, Geist rushes to extract Giuliani from another meeting amid the chaos. After seeing the fire and getting calls for help, the chief reluctantly agrees, and the GRS rushes to the outpost. However, they're stopped by a militant roadblock. Before Amal can talk to them, another militant group shows up, causing a shootout between both groups. Meanwhile, back at the base, Geist arrives with Giuliani and tells the chief to lock down the building before heading to the outpost. At the same time, Roan and the others fight off the militants with 17 February. They're shocked to see how normal this chaos is for the locals, as a civilian calmly watches a soccer match nearby. They take out many militants before reaching the outpost, where they find Wickland, who escaped without Stevens or Smith. The GRS searches for them in the burning building but only finds the deceased Smith. Later on, Amal warns the GRS that the militants are planning another attack. The GRS quickly gathers what they can before preparing to escape. As they're about to leave, they fend off another wave of attackers while loading the remaining DSS agents into a car for their getaway. Jack tries to guide Wickland to turn left to return to the base, but Wickland seems too confused to understand. Wickland drives off, ignoring Jack's instructions, and heads straight into the militants. When they resist being captured, they turn back, facing heavy gunfire. Luckily, their car is bulletproof, allowing them to withstand the onslaught. They manage to reach the base just before the GRS. Upon their arrival, the chief wants to head to the airport for an escape, upon learning that the ambassador is missing, but Roan thinks it's too risky. He insists they call for help, but the chief says it's not possible and they must evacuate. However, Roan takes charge and asserts his authority. The chief briefs his CIA team on an evacuation plan, knowing an attack is imminent. The CIA staff at the annex desperately calls for help, but only former U.S. Navy SEAL Glenn Doherty, the GRS operator in Tripoli, responds. He forms a team, including 2 Delta Force operators, and flies to Benghazi after some delays. Back at the base, the CIA men destroy records and get ready to evacuate while the GRS prepare for another attack, knowing the militants have been watching their suspicious activities. Eventually, a local warns them to turn off their lights to avoid being spotted by the militants. Around 1 a.m., they realize they're surrounded, so they brace themselves for the attack. When the militants get close enough, they throw grenades into the compound, sparking a gun battle. The team manages to fight them off without any casualties, a small victory. Later that night, Glenn finally lands in Benghazi but faces delays caused by haggling generals' overpayment to take them to the base. At the airport, Glenn warns the generals that if anyone dies because of the delays, he'll hold them responsible, which persuades them to move faster. Meanwhile, back at the base, the chief hears that Stevens might be in a local hospital. Giuliani meets Geist on a roof and brings him food. He asks if they've gotten help from the US, but she doubts it. Geist suggests demanding low-flying F-16s to scare off the attackers and buy them time. Elsewhere, Tonto tries to convince Amal to leave for his safety, but Amal insists on staying to help. As Jack voices his concern that Glenn might reach Stevens before them if he's still alive, they notice another wave of militants approaching the building around 3 a.m. A few minutes later, the militants launch their attack, and after some time, the assault stops, leaving the GRS waiting nervously for the next wave. Jack confides in Roan about his worries regarding his family's well-being and the possibility of someone else raising his children. Roan also shares similar anxieties about his own son. At 5:30 a.m., when a convoy approaches the annex, the GRS prepares for a potential confrontation, only to discover it's actually GRS reinforcements escorted by the Libya Shield Force militia. They learn that Stevens' body was found behind the compound but was pronounced dead at the hospital due to asphyxia from the smoke. Glenn requests that they maintain their position at the base while he secures additional vehicles. However, As Glenn departs, the base comes under heavy mortar and artillery attack. Geist sustains injuries, and tragically, Roan loses his life while attempting to assist him. Ubben also suffers a broken leg in the attack. As Tig mourns over Roan's body and Jack grieves nearby, Geist and Ubben receive medical help for their injuries. Meanwhile, another large convoy approaches the base, causing tension among the survivors until they realize it's a friendly force, through the ambo sign. Relieved, they evacuate the premises with the help of the GRS, DSS, and CIA. Though initially reluctant to leave, the chief is convinced by Jack to evacuate, understanding that staying would only complicate matters. As they depart, Tonto invites Amal to leave with him, but Amal chooses to stay behind, expressing regret for his countrymen's actions. As the Americans leave, the Libyans arrive to recover their fallen comrades. At the airport, Gillian and the chief express gratitude to Jack and the GRS. Tonto hands over the keys to their cars to the 17th of February boys before departing. Reflecting on the attack, the GRS suspects it was planned well in advance. Despite the challenges, they're grateful for each other's support and the chance to return home safely. Before leaving Libya, Jack informs Becky of Roan's loss and decides this will be his final tour. He bids farewell to his fallen friend before departing Libya, leaving behind a country facing international condemnation. The movie ends with visuals showing that many of the men retired from the service following the incident. This brings us to the end of the recap. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below and don't forget to follow us for more action thriller movie recaps.